This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to me not having the video on correctly somehow. How the heck did that happen? I don't know, but let's try that again. How about we do this? Is that going to work? There. How the heck did that happen? Anyway, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays, because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays and have immediate technical difficulties, which weren't there before. But hey, them's the breaks of live television. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. It actually is kind of nice out, amazingly enough, which is a rarity, I suppose, but I appreciate it. Yes, so here we are. Once again, rock us like a hurricane. Before I get into today's subject, who's joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning to talk about fun things, educational things, things that will improve our lives, I'm told, over and over again. Mike Savage, good morning. Michael Coffey, good morning. Old Guy Gamer, good morning. Mike R, good morning. The Magister, good morning. Evil One, good morning. Rotten Corpse, good morning. Reagan Ming. Okay, there's my dyslexia going off again or something. Megan Ring. Reagan Ming. All right, there you go. If you needed an alias, you need to go on the run at some point. There you go. Reagan Ming. What is wrong with me today? I don't know. Keeverdam, good morning. Funtime Bats, good morning. Seftus Wolf, good morning. Who else is here? Olga Karakotti, good morning. And Spoonie the Rebel, good morning. Ken Elliott, good morning. The Magister, if I didn't already say so, good morning. Chicago Mike, good morning. Tall Person, good morning. Some Namyo Nation, good morning. Brittany Holland, good morning. Bearded Devil, 1864. It was a very good year. Good morning. Michael Slander. God, what? I'm trying to read. So just for information's sake, the way the screen is in front of me right now, I got to move the window around. I'm like trying to look around my microphone, and I've got that little like half image in my vision of the edge of the microphone as I'm looking at the names. It's throwing me off. So let me try that again. Michael Sander, good morning. Zan Wild, good morning. Shadowclaw, good morning. Derek LaRue, thank you so much, as always, for your continued support and generosity. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Hope you're having a good Sunday so far. Any other names I can mess up before I'm done here? Resolute Germ, good morning. Penny Lawson, good morning. Tyrannus, Alexandrius, the Invictus Lich, good morning. Johnny Blaze, good morning. Data Wasteland, good morning. And I think that's everybody. If that's not everybody, if you're lurking, if I missed you, if you're in the future, good morning. But let's get into today's subject before I completely go off the rails. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I specifically took a look at this subject back in January, and that is critical race theory. And back in January, it was a segment from a PBS station in Wisconsin, which had a professor emeritus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is purportedly, and perhaps is true, the birthplace of critical race theory. But what is critical race theory? Well, the previous video I looked at attempted to explain. It didn't do a very good job, in my opinion, and I think if you watch that video, you may agree. But I have heard about, read about, been told about CRT for several years now. So before we get into today's panel discussion that is intended to explain to us what CRT is, I thought I'd provide a baseline, some bullet points as to how I understand CRT to be, from what I've been told and what I've read, and we can see how that matches up with what we're about to be told from our panel. So here are the bullet points in very summary form. Number one, critical race theory is a legal framework which is only really used in law schools or at the university level. It has nothing to do and would never be taught in any of the K through 12 schools. No, it never would be. Right? That's always very explicitly stated. Seems to be. Second bullet point, a critical race theory examines the interconnected/intersectional influence that race and racism has in all aspects of life, all of our systems, all of our institutions, and so on and so forth. Okay. Number 3, critical race theory is about preserving the truth of history, i.e. making known what would otherwise be suppressed knowledge. So we're not allowed to talk about how Jefferson owned slaves, or we're not allowed to talk about slavery. And that's what the anti-CRT people want to do. They want to conceal the truth of America's origins as a racist country, that kind of stuff, purportedly. Number 4, critical race theory and anti-racism sentiments are effectively interchangeable. Now, that's just my observation, because the crux of the anti-racism movement and philosophy is similar to CRT, that race and racism is endemic and woven into every aspect of our lives. It is a universal constant. You cannot escape it. You cannot not be racist. You're either racist or confessing to your racism. Those are really the only two states of being. And CRT seems to support that notion quite a bit in a lot of its rhetoric. And lastly, but certainly not necessarily completely, because I don't have all the time in the world for bullet points, criticisms of CRT is the same as perpetuating systemic racism. So those are the themes, the points, the arguments, bits and pieces that I've come to know commonly when it comes to explaining what critical race theory is and or what it supposedly isn't. That all being said, we have a panel discussion here from about a month ago, thereabouts, and this comes from the First Amendment Museum, an organization I had never heard of before, but I appreciate the fact that they support the First Amendment, because this should be a nice, open and free dialogue on the subject without any, people coming along saying I couldn't take a look at this video. So that being the case, let's get right into it, as I've paused long enough here for people to come in and the show to start. Affable Vagrant, good morning. No Name, good morning. Nathaniel Rotzko, good morning. Conto Hair, good morning. And Miranda Stone, good morning. So with all of that, as preamble, let's get into it. This thing runs an hour. I'm only going to go for about an hour and a half in real time, unless there is some really compelling reason to do otherwise, and we'll see what we get out of it. Purportedly, all of our speakers are experts in some way, shape, or form. I'm hoping they'll be introduced as we go. And with that, start off with a few seconds for a sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this episode of First Amendment Unscripted.
First Amendment Unscripted. It's not unlike MTV Unplugged, just with, fewer guitars and long hair. Everybody hear that okay? Let me know in the chat real quick. Audio is good, says Derek LaRue. Sounds fine. Muffled a little, but fine. Yeah, with the Zoom calls, every person's webcam or microphone, your mileage is going to vary. I attempted to boost and clean up the sound a little bit beforehand, so it's as good as it's going to get. Hopefully everybody's webcam is working correctly.
I'm Max Nospich, the Manager of Education and Visitor Experiences here at the First Amendment Museum in Augusta, Maine. Today, I'm joined by 3 wonderful panelists, and today's topic is critical race theory.
Yay.
So I'm going to let my panelists go ahead and introduce themselves.
It's a funny topic, that critical race theory.
Starting with Alan.
My name is Alan Singer. I'm a teacher, educator, historian at Husky University, which is in the New York metropolitan area. And I'm a former New York City high school teacher, and I've written about critical race theory in a number of venues, including History News Network.
Okay. I love people who are invested in the subject matter.
Awesome. And Jeremy?
Thank you. I'm Jeremy Young, Senior Manager of Free Expression and Education at PEN America, where I lead our work combating educational gag orders and other legislation that censors critical race theory and other topics in high school and college classrooms. I'm also a trained historian and a former college professor.
Oh, so he is a frontline warrior against the anti-CRT movement. All right. Well, good.
And Francesca.
Hi, I'm Francesca Lopez. I'm the Waterbury Chair of Equity Pedagogy at Penn State University and a former bilingual teacher and high school counselor.
Equity Pedagogy. Ooh, I love equity. Don't you? I love equality of outcome.
So I'm going to start off the conversation with a very easy question, maybe. What is critical race theory?
Oh boy, here we go. Start off easy. All right, what is critical race theory? No, okay. And again, my constant complaint and note to all of you out there who may become moderators in discussions in the future, do not let a question hang in the air. Select one of your panelists to begin and then move around the circle or whatever. Just stop doing this, leaving it hanging thing. I hate it.
Francesca, you have to go first on this.
You want me to go
No
first?
question.
Oh, if your guest has to do it for you, come on, man.
Absolutely.
Very good.
You're an expert on this.
Ladies first.
We're not.
So,
We're not.
and I can't wait to hear what Alan has to say. I mean, just the essence of critical race theory is it emerged in the 1970s in legal research.
It's a legal framework.
There's legal scholars that included Derek Bell, Alan Freeman, Richard Delgado, many others. And in essence, they were frustrated by some failures of critical legal studies. And they really wanted to examine the understanding of the permanence of racism. And so some of the things that we end up seeing is its application to things like Brown versus Board of Education. It came into education in about 1995 by Gloria Ladson-Billings and William Tate writing about it to try to understand the inequities that persisted beyond, this legal analysis. So
it's not just a legal framework, and it has been introduced into education. Generalized education, I should say.
It's something that's typically been relegated to graduate level study.
Typically.
And then suddenly was co-opted and consumed many terms that are now in the lexicon seem to be equity, culturally relevant, many other things that we do in schools to try to address inequities.
Okay, so critical race theory has informed or dissolved down into somewhat mainstream common practices in general education. Okay. Maybe that's the dividing line they keep trying to pin their flag on, is that technically critical race theory, the actual thing, is only used in universities. It's not taught in schools. Is that the hair they're trying to split?
Now, as an historian, I actually place the roots of critical race theory much deeper in the American past.
Oh.
Just for example, in the 1965 Voting Rights Act, it established the principle that unless you could demonstrate that a government action had legitimate purpose, if it was discriminatory, it had to be revoked. And this was done to ensure that African Americans would be able to vote. So that is really a very early legal approach to what then becomes critical race theory. But historically, it even goes much deeper than that.
Okay, well, you might want to take some time. Maybe they will alight upon and more thoroughly examine one of these examples he's bringing up, but okay.
In the 1830s.
The 1830s. Okay, what happened in the 1830s that informed critical race theory?
A French scholar named Alexis de Tocqueville visits the United States, publishes a book which he calls Democracy in America. But one of the things he argues is that freedom for whites is based on inequality for blacks.
You don't say.
That's an insight from the 1830s.
Wow. Captain Obvious territory to me, but maybe that's just my retrospective knowledge of history. I don't know. Was that some grand revelation back in the 1830s?
And then in the 1850s, the Supreme Court rules that under this is the Dred Scott decision, that African Americans have no rights in the United States at all.
Oh my gosh. Do you mean to tell me that laws and policies and culture in the past of America were bad compared to today in a lot of situations? Is Dred Scott still valid today?
That's really the white version of critical race theory. And that becomes the basis for Jim Crow, for segregation, for Governor George Wallace in 1963, standing at the door of the University of Alabama, shouting segregation forever.
So we've
had this a long time.
Yes, racism and discrimination has existed for a long time, and it exists right now because people are people. But we have implemented and changed several laws since the 1850s. So as far as legal framework is concerned, maybe I'm missing something.
Is critical race theory, what's the difference between critical race theory and just teaching the history of racism or race or slavery or Jim Crow or discrimination in the United States? Is there a difference, or are those the same things, or is it like a Venn diagram where there's a lot of come together?
I mean, he's asking decent questions based on the controversies regarding critical race theory. Interesting. Keldrick, thank you so much. This dude sounds like he lived through the 1830s. Yeah, I not quite sure what he was trying to say there. It's like, okay, any instance of racist policy, racist law, racist culture in America's history is part of critical race theory. Well, then, yeah, our moderator's question then is very valid. Okay, well, does that just mean that a history lesson on racism in America is critical race theory? Because that doesn't necessarily require a legal framework or something. They keep talking about it as a legal framework. What's that supposed to mean? And then our expert over here is just bringing up historical facts about race relations and racial laws in the country over the course of, 250 years or something? So
I say they're totally different. I mean,
they are? Well, then why did Alan Singer just give us a history lesson? The question was, explain critical race theory. I forget her name down here. The lady says it's a legal framework and bits and pieces of it have been co-opted and have ended up in elementary schools or regular education. Alan up here gives us a history lesson on various legal precedents that are now absolutely defunct or have been overwritten by other laws about history. And then our moderator asks, well, then is critical race theory just an examination of history? And this guy's like, no. Okay, well, I'm fine if they all disagree on what it is, but that also doesn't tell me that anybody knows what it is.
The critical race theory is
if you say a legal framework, I'm going to take a shot.
I think it's more instructive to start, to me at least, to start from what critical race theory isn't.
Okay. All right. Well, rather than explaining what it is, which should be fairly easy, let's go for the opposite end. What isn't critical race theory?
It isn't a catch-all term for anything you don't like about diversity policies or procedures in education.
It isn't a catch-all term for things I don't like. That doesn't tell me that I don't like as an individual. Well, my tastes or opinions can vary because my opinions are subjective. So what is the definition of critical race theory? If you tell me the definition of critical race theory, that kind of helps to eliminate what it isn't when you tell me what it is. Because I could spend all day telling you what an orange is not, because it's unlike anything else. Also an orange. That is not a productive way to start this. No, it's not. You're a professor.
That is not what critical race theory is.
What is it?
That's how it's been weaponized.
Tell us what it is.
It's not what it means. Critical race theory, as Francesca put it very eloquently, is a theoretical approach to understanding the world.
So is Catholicism. So is the Kabbalah. So is Scientology. Okay. That is not a definition. Keep going.
That's not the same thing as learning about the history of slavery or racism, which certainly involves interpretations and ways of understanding evidence. But it's not. I mean, critical race theory is a theory. It is the idea of the systemic nature of racism.
Uh-huh.
It has to do with various concepts related to race and how it interacts with not only American history but world history and world culture.
Right.
But it's a theoretical approach. The idea that that you can.
Okay. Why are you making excuses for it? It's a theoretical approach. Yeah, well, like the theory of gravity is just a theory. That's not quite. What do you mean? Okay, if you're making apologia for it, that it's not specific or it's just a theory, then why are we here? It has to be something more important than that sort of dismissive tone, right?
You're hearing some of the difficulties that some of us have describing it. The idea that...
Yeah, I am hearing the difficulties you're having describing it because apparently there's no definition. If you guys, okay, if our panel, setting aside our moderator, if our panel has been looking into this or working for this or advocating for it for years and or decades, then the elevator pitch for what it is and its utility and value should be instantaneous. You should be able to rattle that off immediately. I've said this before. The job that I have in real life, unlike YouTube life, which is, semi-real, I've been doing it for the last 15 years. If somebody came to me and said, describe to me what your company does or what your product does, I could give you just by osmosis, because I don't work in the really technical stuff. I don't work in marketing, but just by experiencing my company and knowing what the product is, I could rattle off to you the 30 seconds elevator pitch immediately without having to think too hard. Why can't you define critical race theory when asked directly? It's just a theory. What? Thank you, Chicago Mike. Critical race theory isn't the name of the new game show. It should be. It should be. I mean, I'm looking basically at Hollywood Squares here, right? Imagine a game show where it's like critical race theory, and then everybody has to give their interpretation of what it is. And then the contestant has to figure out, okay, what is utter and absolute nonsense and what is actually used in the academic circles to describe it. Wouldn't that be a game show? Thank you, Chicago Mike. Okay, anyway, I'm going to back up a little bit. I am cutting my speaker off here a little bit because he's babbling, but okay, I'll just let it run for a minute.
Various concepts related to race and how it interacts with not only American history, but world history and world culture. But it's a theoretical approach. The idea that, that you can, that you're hearing some of the difficulties that some of us have describing it. The idea that you could teach this to third graders is impossible. And honestly, if you told a third grader that they were, if you tried to explain critical race theory to a third grader, you wouldn't be doing any damage because they wouldn't understand you.
Okay, so critical race theory and its derivatives are not being used in elementary schools. Okay, well, it would help a lot if you would define what is critical race theory. And then tell me how it is that Francesca below you just told us a couple of minutes ago that elements of CRT are being used in education, regular old K through 12. Wait. Okay, wait, no, sorry. I know I keep pausing, but he's going silent. So his pitch was to tell us what it isn't. And then he tells us what it is without telling us what it isn't, and also not telling us what it is.
Anybody else?
I mean, I'll just add, to Jeremy's point,
what point? What point?
A great example of its application. It is this theoretical lens. Ian Haney Lopez was one of Derek Bell's students, a legal scholar from Berkeley, and he applied CRT in his analysis of the Hernandez versus Texas case, right? So here he's using this to examine how is race being used to subordinate people.
How is race being used to subordinate people? You mean aside from our history of laws and slavery and everything where people were divided up by what they look like and some were valued as X and others were valued as Y and treated differently on the basis of what they look like? Is it really that complicated? Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. CRT equals kids are dumb, confirmed. Well, kids are being made to be dumb. I'm not quite going. What's going on? Seems YouTube is censoring my posts about a movie release that everyone should see, says Data Wasteland. I don't know what that means, but good morning. All right. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. All right. So CRT is what again?
I mean, that's the essence of it. When is a law or a policy being used to keep people subordinate?
When is a law or policy being used to keep people subordinate? Okay, so critical race theory is about examining laws for discrimination. Is that it? Because you keep talking about legal frameworks and things. If that is the simple definition, why didn't that just come out immediately? So, a law is passed or a precedent is made or something, and then some CRT scholar comes in and takes a look at the legal record on it, on the law, on the loopholes in the text and everything else, and tries to find where there might be mechanisms that would inherently discriminate on race specifically, not gender, not orientation, not religion, but specifically race. Is that the definition?
That's basically CRT applied in its spirit.
Basically applied in its spirit? What?
See, I think CRT is really just one aspect of good history.
Jesus. Will you guys make up your minds? Okay, if it has no definition, then it doesn't mean anything. If it's meant to be a very finely tuned academic analysis of legal precedents or laws that are passed, looking for loopholes or mechanisms that would discriminate on the basis of race, I mean, you start going down the road of, well, are you sort of encouraging people to read between the lines of a cookbook? But at least at that point, it would be something specific. But no, it's an analysis of history. But no, it has nothing to do with history. No, history is two different things from CRT. CRT is just a theory. We're not even 10 minutes into this thing. And we have three people who purport to be experts and or advocates for this, and they have no idea what they're talking about one to another. And I look at the face of our moderator right now, and his face is my feeling.
One of my areas of study is the history of slavery, both its complicity and resistance in the New York area. Now, what happened is because of my own questions about the role race plays in America today, I began to explore the origins of race and racism in America in the past. Using that lens, I uncovered things that really had been erased from history.
I seriously doubt that. I seriously doubt that you are some kind of existential Indiana Jones dusting off the dirt of intentional obscured history and finding secrets that nobody else could have found before. I'm seeing a corkboard with a lot of red twine on it right now.
There's slavery in New York State up until 1827.
Yeah.
But New York bankers and merchants financed the illegal transatlantic slave trade into Cuba up until the American Civil War. And we're talking about institutions like the predecessor bank of Citibank.
Do you mean to tell me that financial institutions have profited off of evil acts over the course of history? I'm shocked. And so how are you able to find this information when nobody else could have? Okay, and what is that supposed to mean now? How does that apply to today? As though, and I'm not saying that banks don't still do evil things for profit or take advantage of regimes, countries, or policies that are inhuman to any thinking person, but to an institution like a financial, a bank or a hedge fund or whatever. It doesn't matter as long as there's a buck to be made.
Now, if I hadn't started with the questions about race and racism today, I don't think I would have unwound those aspects of history.
Why? What? The questions about racism today allowed you to discover that banks took advantage of the Atlantic slave trade in the 1800s. I don't think that was a secret.
I think that's why that lens is so important.
That lens of... For having been an educator of some kind in the past, I'm not feeling very educated.
So why did I like? Okay, so I'll be honest. I went to, I have a master's degree and so in a history adjacent program, and I don't think I heard that much about the term critical race theory in undergrad or grad school. But in the past maybe year or two, I've heard about it nonstop from everybody, from people in the press, on the news, to people who come to the museum and have questions about it, to my parents. So why are we seeing an explosion in conversation interest about critical race theory? Where did it come from? And explain all this to me.
Well, let's see real quick over back. Thank you, Chicago Mike. Are we still trying to get the definition of CRT? I mean, the title of their own presentation is, let me see if I can find it here real quick. Critical Race Theory Explained! ! That is the title of this presentation. So, yes, I'm still waiting to have it explained to me. But yeah, why is CRT suddenly becoming so prevalent? Why is this being brought up? Well, it's been around for a while, and people have been using it to fuel their agendas and their philosophies as some kind of high-minded academic pursuit. And yet every time I take a look at it, every time I listen to people purporting to advocate for it or be experts on it, I'm hearing the same kind of nonsense I hear from anti-racism, from DEI practices, etc. I think a whole lot of things that we're seeing today have been derived from pseudo-academic analysis of American history in attempting to put a value on people on the basis of race. That's it. That's all I can take from this so far. As a layman, just listening to the experts supposedly tell me what it is that reality operates under. Okay.
So there's two answers to this question.
Oh, two answers. Okay. Are you going to tell us what the answers aren't first before you tell us what the answers
are? One is about the term, and one is about what it's being used to describe, right?
Yeah, even Alan's like, there's only two answers to this.
Right. But yeah, there may be more than two.
Experts.
There is one thing that we have observed in American society over the last 3 years, 3 to 4 years, is a significant backlash against the sort of racial reckoning that seemed to be available to our society in the aftermath of the George Floyd protests, with the incredible popularity of the New York Times 1619 Project. There's been a lot of
popularity of 1619. What did 1619 profess to say again? How many times did they revise themselves? How many declarative statements about the truth of what they were teaching did they have to walk back after historians actually looked at what they were saying and came back with criticisms? Yeah, the 1619 Project that claims that America's foundation took place in 1619 with the advent of slavery. Right? Is that what that is? Okay, so so our speaker is in support of the 1619 Project and the racial reckoning from the death of George Floyd. Okay, what were we supposed to learn out of the death of George Floyd, according to our? That's what I want to know. What is, in his opinion, since we're looking for definitions here, what was the racial reckoning? What was the lesson to be learned there? And what did the 1619 Project teach that was so necessary and so revolutionary that we had to hear it today?
Discomfort, a cultural and racial backlash against the ideas brought up in those conversations,
such as
those protests and that source.
Such as what? What were the elements or benefits, in our speaker's opinion, that came about as a result of the 1619 Project and the death of George Floyd,
that has led to a desire to clamp down on discussions of that type?
What discussions? What are you talking about? Why is it so difficult to get an explanation or a definition? Every time I take a look at one of these things, every time I have a panel of experts or an interview with somebody who purports to be an expert on one of these things, and you never get specificity. Come on, man. Let me do a Joe Biden.
Now, what does that have to do with critical race theory? Absolutely nothing.
Wait. Critical race theory is supposed to be examining the ways in which race and racism permeate our society and our laws. And you bring up the 1619 Project, which was purportedly a historical examination of race and racism in this country. And you bring up George Floyd and the racial reckoning, which was supposed to be some kind of backlash or change in our society on the basis of how people are treated by the legal system and the criminal justice system and law enforcement in specific, and has nothing to do with critical race theory, which is a legal framework. Okay, has nothing to do with it.
Those conversations and those protests and that source that has led to a desire to clamp down on discussions of that type. Now, what does that have to do with critical race theory? Absolutely nothing, because certainly, the people who are out there protesting George Floyd's murder are not reading critical race theory texts. They're not.
Okay, that might or might not be relevant, but people who protested George Floyd don't believe in critical race theory? What?
Reading Derek Bell in their protest slogans. It's disconnected.
It's disconnected. Okay. Tell me something, Jeremy Young. Where does the anti-racism philosophy end and the critical examination of American history and race begin with CRT? Okay. You don't think that there was the anti-racism ideology running through the entirety of you don't think that the anti-racism ideology was bolstered and galvanized by the fallout from the George Floyd murder? You don't think that was the case? You don't think that how to be anti-racist didn't just appear out of nowhere and become like the hottest selling coffee table book on the planet at that point? You don't think that has anything to do with CRT? Really? Okay.
And the answer to this one is very specific. You can go on Twitter and find a guy named Christopher Rufo who.
Oh, Christopher! Oh my gosh! Christopher Rufo was brought up in the last CRT thing I looked at. Okay, so rather than arguing your point, you're now going to go to the critic. Oh, tell us about how the critic is the bad guy.
He works at the Manhattan Institute.
Yeah,
and he lays out in a series of tweets in late 2020 and early 2021.
I think he's probably written in places other than Twitter, but never mind that.
How he is going to use this obscure term, critical race theory, to apply to all of these things that he and other people don't like about diversity and diversity discussions in American society.
Well, didn't Francesca tell us earlier that critical race theory has been used and taken apart and pieces of it have been applied into education? Or was she making an accusation of critics? Maybe I'm confusing something here. Everybody's been so clear on their explanation so far.
And the argument is very simple. He says, basically, this is a term that is obscure. It is scholarly. It is, it has to do with a theory that's hard to describe.
It is obscure. It's scholarly. It has it's hard to describe. Why is it hard to describe? You guys act like it's a very simple thing. It's a very nonchalant thing. It's just a theory or whatever else.
Unless you're really an expert in it.
Well, okay, you guys are supposedly experts in it. Oh my God.
For that reason, it's not very popular.
What?
And so he's going to take a lot of ideas that are more popular, like the idea that African Americans should have a fair shake in our society, that maybe they don't have a fair shake in our society, and maybe we should do something about that. And he's going to take that obscure term and stick it on that as a label to make it more unpopular. It's a branding strategy. And we've been seeing the fruits of that branding strategy over the last 3 years.
Okay, so rather than talk about what critical race theory is and giving a definition, you're going to complain about somebody who has latched onto the term. Okay, here's something. If you have a better explanation, you fight a bad idea with a better idea. So tell us what it is, describe its utility, Don't try to say what it isn't. Don't complain about people criticizing it. If you're an expert in it and you believe in it, whatever, explain it. Give me an example. If it's a complicated and whatever, then give me an active example of how it is applied in a particular situation. You take this event or this law or whatever it is, and then walk me through the steps of applying critical race theory to that thing. Because even if it's difficult to describe without a whole bunch of scholarly terms and analyses and things, then just give me a practical demonstration of its use.
Yeah, I'll add to that this is a strategy that's been quite successful among politicians.
Okay, you're going to complain about the complainers. Stop complaining about the complainers. Demonstrate for the audience why this thing exists and what its utility is. Because if you can do that, then anybody criticizing it on the outside, the falseness of their complaints will be made plain. Okay. Oh my gosh.
Because they rely on fear, right? They rely on the mobilization of their intended recipients to be afraid that by claiming that white children are going to be made to feel guilty in classrooms, that parents are going to stand up and say, I don't want my child to be learning these things that are going to make them feel bad, right?
Okay. Are there schools that are teaching white children to feel guilty about what they are? Are there schools that have put out documents or tests or assignments that would tend to suggest that if you are white, you are guilty of something? Yes or no? If the answer is no, if it's not happening, or it's happening in such small numbers that it really doesn't matter or something, or it's some, wacko independent school somewhere, okay. But is that being done or isn't it? What does the 1619 project being used and has been used in regular K through 12 schools, what does the 1619 project teach about the dynamics between white people and black people inherently? Not as a matter of history, as a matter of lesson and internalized assessment today. Is that all nonsense?
Right. But there's quite a bit of history of the use of certain terms that are coded appeals for really that means something else.
Like,
for example, Nixon and law and order, right?
Nixon and law and order. If you brought up the phrase law and order to anybody today, the first thing they'd go to is SVU, right? Or they'd be thinking about Jerry Orbach or something. What?
There's a coded dog whistle there in terms of who he means when he's talking about law and order.
I'm thinking about Jerry Orbach and Chris Noth and Michael Moriarty and, what was her name? I forget her name all of a sudden. She got her own show, Crossing Jordan. Why can I forget? Henning? Was the last name Henning? Anyway, yeah, McCoy, Nixon's law and order is coded language. Do people use that today? And if they did, would anybody even be aware of that? Are you nuts?
Critical race theory was one of those so-called dog whistles, right? That it's an umbrella term to say anything that is engaging equitable approaches for students who have not had a fair shake in society is the CRT, and it's a zero-sum game. That means that white students are going to get less. So it to your question, Max, it was intentional. They've had quite a bit of success. And if you actually look at the Google Trends, when, as Jeremy pointed out, Rufo came out with it, you see this uptick over the summer where it just goes like wildfire, starts to die down, and then right before elections in November, it peaks again. So they're using it to manipulate, the outcomes that we then saw with school boards and other elections across the country.
What is critical race theory? Explain what it is. Set the boundaries, set the limitations on what it actually is, and then you can put that explanation and that definition up against the claims of Christopher Rufo or whoever else, and you can point out how it's absolutely wrong. Why is that so difficult? Define it. Give an active example of it in use. Walk us through the steps of applying critical race theory to an event, a law, a precedent, whatever. If you guys are so much in defense of it, you should be able to do that fairly easily. But out of the three of our speakers so far, I've gotten different answers or no answers at all.
I'd like to build on what Francisca said.
Please.
1968, Richard Nixon runs for president on the Southern strategy. And basically the idea is to use race and racism to mobilize white working class voters to vote Republican.
Yes. Yes, that is well documented. Mm-hmm.
And this has been the Republican strategy since that time.
The Republican strategy since 1968 to today is the Southern strategy. Trying to make people of different racial demographics fight against each other for the benefit of the party. Sir, are you certain that that strategy isn't being used in politics writ large? You don't think the Democratic Party, and this isn't me absolving the Republican Party of anything, but you don't think the Democratic Party plays on racial dynamics in this country for votes? I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? Okay.
Lee Atwater, who was one of Nixon's advisors, actually laid it out in an interview in the 1990s.
Yes.
And Atwater said, in the 1950s, you could use the N-word. Well, we can't use that anymore. That's discredited. So now we talk about welfare queens, and we talk about busing, we talk about critical race theory.
Yeah, there's a great documentary about Lee Atwater called Boogeyman that lays out. He was sort of the Karl Rove of his day. In fact, I think Karl Rove was one of his students, effectively. Lee Atwater was a very, very interesting guy. Not necessarily single-handedly responsible for some of the slimiest spin doctoring, but certainly mastered it. If you can find a copy of that somewhere, I don't know if it's on YouTube or elsewhere, but yeah, Boogeyman. About Lee Atwater. And Script Doctor's in the chat. Hello, Script Doctor. Hope you enjoyed your bug hunting in Starship Troopers yesterday. If you guys don't know about Script Doctor, well, aside from being a professional alien slaughterer and demon killer, he's also occasionally a scriptwriter. And you go check out his channel. He's often a guest on Midnight's Edge and sometimes on Pop Culture Minefield. So yeah, go check out Script Doctor.
But it's all about mobilizing white voters to see African Americans, to see urban liberals as the enemy, and to keep a minority party, the Republican Party, in power.
Okay, and you're telling me that this same strategy on the reverse of trying to mobilize the black voters against the evil racist Republicans isn't already and has been used for years. Okay, and again, this isn't me absolving or elevating the idea as to something, oh, it's okay because somebody else does it. No, it's ridiculous. The problem is that it works. It works and everybody does it. It is as cynical, but yet as pragmatic a strategy as you're going to find in politics. And in America, surprisingly, I can't imagine why, trying to push votes on the basis of racial strife is a very easy sell. And guess why? Can you guess why that might be?
They did it in the 86 election, the 88 election, where Dukakis was somehow branded with Willie Horton. And what we see now, Donald Trump used it very successfully in 2016.
Are you going to talk about Biden? Was it him talking to Charlemagne the God? If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Are you going to bring up that little tidbit?
Stigmatizing people, primarily focusing on immigrants. And we have Ron DeSantis in Florida, who's looking to run for president either in 24 or 28.
Any critiques of any Democratic candidates? or Democratic politicians? Any at all on playing the race card, on playing racial divisions? Any? It's only one-sided. Only one side are the bad guys, and you wonder why the divisiveness exists and is perpetuated right now. It's so bad. Anyway, Chicago Mike, thanks so much. You ain't black if you don't vote Democratic. Who said that, and which party was he from? I don't know, and I don't know. That's my answer. But if someone guesses it in the chat, and you see it, Chicago Mike, I grant you the ability to give them a no prize. As long as they didn't Google it or something. Because we don't want to do that. Okay, yes. Playing off racial divisions in politics. It's sort of like using a pretty girl in an advertisement. Sex sells. Race as a divisive issue for voting works, unfortunately. I wish it weren't the case. There might be ways we could start changing our attitudes about these things to make it less of an issue, but some people seem to keep profiting off of it. And when there's a profit motive,
DeSantis has been out in the lead, taking critical race theory and saying this is somehow going to victimize white people. And then we have idiots like Elon Musk, who actually tweeted that we now have racism against whites in America.
There isn't? Are you guys delusional? What? There's no racism against white people in this country. Look at all these little, except for our moderator here, who's like as grim can be. Everybody here is got these little smug little smiles on their faces. What bubble have you guys been living in?
So we'll get to Florida. I have questions about Florida, but okay. So is this a Republican Democrat issue? Is it simplifying it too much to say Democrats support critical race theory, Republicans are against it, or and how does this play into party politics?
Well, I think Alan just laid it out very plain. Critical race theory is on the side of the angels. And if you're not on the side of the angels, well, where else do you have to go?
I haven't heard any politician come out in favor of critical race theory.
You haven't heard any politician what?
I think they mostly ignore it. But there are some who talk about social justice. And the Democrats, Biden got the nomination because of South Carolina, where he pledged to have a more socially just America.
How about bring up the anti-racism push. Tell me how the language and the rhetoric and the logic behind the anti-racism argument doesn't exactly align with what is purportedly, and I say purportedly because we still haven't gotten a definition, but what I have heard said to me multiple times about the utility and the benefits of critical race theory. Tell me how those two ideas don't intersect, and then tell me how anti-racism as a concept isn't being actively pushed into K through 12 schools and amongst businesses writ large in this country. Because you guys keep talking about changing terms and things like that, and that's true. That's true. But what I would ask our panel, if I had the opportunity, I'd say, how much is the anti-racism movement just a reconfiguring of CRT? And if not, why not?
And I think that's what the Democrats have talked about.
Francesca,
it's a strategy that has been used in a bipartisan fashion, right?
Yes.
But to Alan's point,
Okay, wait. You can't make an admission like that. Come on. It's a strategy that's been used in a bipartisan fashion, right? Dividing people on the basis of race to drive votes. Okay, that admission is very profound to the discussion because it's not a one-sided thing, right?
You absolutely see the successes that have morphed into today's Republican Party that have roots from lack of success with Goldwater, right? There's this morphing that has occurred over time where that strategy, again, to Alan's point, you can really pinpoint it with Nixon, but Clinton has used it.
Yeah. Okay.
It is bipartisan because it moves
Yeah. And what is on the opposite side of
It
the aisle?
mobilizes people.
What demographics are being taken advantage of, either victimized or vilified? And so, okay. If it's not a partisan strategy, you have to look at that then across the board and not just say that Ron DeSantis is evil. If Clinton used it too, did Obama use it? Does the Democratic Party in general count on certain demographics to vote for them? And what do they do to try to engender that support cycle by cycle? Thank you, Chicago Mike, again. I think I got the quote wrong, but I was talking about the Biden quote. I kind of like the moderator as he seems to challenge the expert. Our moderator is a little passive, but at least he's trying to hold their feet to the fire. And he's letting them, make their own beds, as it were. He's not cutting in a lot. He's not trying to soften their answers or try to correct them or something or try to guide them towards a particular end, which I very much appreciate. A lot of times in these panel discussions, you get softball questions or just nodding and smiling and such. At least our moderator is trying to get some specificity out of them and letting them just go with whatever they have to say and not interjecting too much. Because oftentimes you'll see moderators who are shepherding the answers or trying to protect the speakers from saying something out of turn or whatever. But yes, so far, moderator's doing a good job. Save for the part of, trying to direct answers from questions rather than let them hang in the air. But other than that, so far, so good. Anyway, all right. So it is a bipartisan strategy, the Southern strategy. And this has what to do with defining CR.
The way we're seeing it today, but I wouldn't say it's exclusive to Republicans, but it's definitely become the mantra of the GOP.
The mantra of the GOP, what has? CRT? Hey, don't get me wrong, I understand CRT can be an easy catch-all. The problem is that you guys are doing a terrible job of defining it as a catch-all because you keep saying it's a theory and it's difficult to explain. And it covers so many broad areas in world culture and laws and other. So if it's being used as a catch-all incorrectly, why are you guys telling us it's a catch-all?
And what's interesting about this frame, it's true that certainly we hear a lot of Republican politicians attacking critical race theory.
Yeah.
But if you look at the actual things that are being banned by critical race theory ban legislation, they are broadly popular, including among Republicans.
So popularity equals good? Slavery was really popular at a time, I don't know.
Poll after poll says 75, 80% of Americans think that we should be teaching the honest history of slavery. And
how does anti-CRT legislation prevent the honest teaching of slavery and history? Show me where it says that. And I'm not being facetious when I say that. I don't know every single anti-CRT law out there. I don't know the language of every piece of legislation state to state. But you show me a law or a draft or anything else that says thou shalt not teach American history in a factual manner, whatever the subject, and I'll be right there with you. But you need to cite something. You need to give me an active example of a piece of legislation that is quote unquote anti-CRT that explicitly prohibits schools from teaching history
and racism in America, even if it makes students uncomfortable.
That's not, even if it makes students uncomfortable. Even if, why would teaching history make students uncomfortable? I mean, aside from the fact of if you're going to detail some of the atrocities, obviously that can make anybody feel uncomfortable because if you're a human being and can empathize with other human beings. But what do you mean?
And that includes a majority of self-identified Republicans and even of Trump supporters. So this is really, but then when you say, do you support critical race theory, then you get a down the middle result, right? So it is as Francesca and Alan have been saying, it's an effective frame to depopularize things that are in fact extremely popular in a bipartisan sense.
Like what? Seriously, and again, I'm not trying to be, vitriolic for the sake of vitriol. Like what? You guys are all experts. Give us an active example, a law, a policy, an initiative, a program, something.
So is critical race theory being taught in schools? And I asked this, and not universities. I want to keep this to elementary, middle, and high school.
Excellent. Okay. Yes. Good. Let's get a definitive answer if we can.
Public schools in the United States. And I asked this question because
if CRT is not being taught in schools, elementary K through 12, then an anti-CRT piece of legislation affecting K through 12 schools should be moot, right?
I believe I've seen, again, this is my conception. I've seen that people have accused that of happening, and then other people have come back and said, well, it's a good thing, or it's not happening at all. So is critical race theory being taught in public schools, middle, elementary, and high?
That's a really wonderful question, because
it is a really wonderful question. It should have a very, very binary answer.
I think, the way we defined it, no, you're really not.
The way you what? Wait. The way that you what? No.
What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
The way you did not define it. None of you, none of the three of you have defined critical race theory at all in any way, shape, or form. You have done everything but to define it. You haven't given an active example. You haven't described its process. You haven't given us any idea of how it works. It's either a history lesson or it's not a history lesson. It's either a legal analysis or it's a social analysis. You guys have done nothing to define it.
Not going to find one of the big criticisms in teacher education, and I think Alan can speak to this as well as a teacher educator, is we have so much research demonstrating that people who go through teacher preparation programs do not get sufficient knowledge and skills to be able to address inequities.
What?
It's something that's been lacking. So then to somehow magically see all these teachers capable of applying CRT in a developmentally appropriate way, that is very, very rare.
Are you kidding? Okay. All right. Again, look up the term anti-racism and elementary school, and you will see anti-racist classroom. I have done and looked at countless presentations now on introducing anti-racism into the classroom. Is your teacher anti-racist? Is your classroom anti-racist? How can we introduce anti-racism into the classroom? Now, take a look at what anti-racism says about the world. Anti-racism says, and I got this straight from the source's mouth, Ibram X. Kendi. Anti-racism says that racism is in all things and all people. You cannot get rid of it. It is a universal constant. You cannot be not racist. You're either racist or you're admitting to your racism. Okay, that's it. Now, tell me how critical race theory doesn't as well promote the idea that race and racism permeates our laws, our institutions, our culture at all times, in all things. And when you guys bring up the 1619 Project as a beneficial aspect or outgrowth or, parallel to CRT, well, what does the 1619 Project promote? That the United States began in 1619 with the advent of slavery. So the entirety of U.S. history is based inexorably on race, racism, and slavery. What does anti-racism promote as a practice, as a theory in education today? These things are not, you cannot divide them one from the other. Okay? Whether or not anti-racism is informed by CRT, I think it's pretty clear to me. But even if it isn't, the rhetoric is exactly the same. The sentiments are exactly the same. The lessons purportedly are exactly the same. So you guys want to say you can play around with terms and different things? Okay, tell me how anti-racism is not critical race theory. Because anti-racism is being promoted, pushed, and taught in elementary schools.
It would have to be someone that understands CRT, who has had coursework in it, who understands how to apply it. That is not likely to be the case.
You guys can't even define what it is. You guys cannot even define what it is.
What you will find is equity pedagogies.
Okay, well, how are equity pedagogies not informed by CRT or not related to CRT?
Things that have permeated into the teacher education realm that intentionally became conflated with this term. So,
okay, well then tell us why they are two separate nations with a giant ocean between them. Describe and define CRT. How is it not connected to equity pedagogies? How is it not connected, at least from my perspective, to the anti-racism theories and practices being promoted in elementary schools?
Culturally responsive practices, culturally relevant practices that span across K-12 that, to Jeremy's point, is very supported because they are approaches where we know through research all students gain from it.
All students gain from culturally relevant teachings? Okay. I would love for our speakers to listen to other people who promote cultural competence and cultural relevancy in schools and see what they say. What are the lessons to be learned from that? What are the examples that are used, the success stories? Because I've looked at cultural competency. I've looked at cultural relevancy, cultural literacy, etc. It's the same stuff. Some races are more vilified or victimized than others, and people need to know the history so they know where they fit when it comes to the consequences of racism of the past and how they are tied to it and how they benefit from it or are victimized from it today. Okay, if that has nothing to do with CRT, by all means, but you need to define CRT.
All students' identities, the kind of predictors that we see that lead to students thriving, those are the kind of things that are being labeled CRT, but they are not the CRT that before 2020 existed only in grad schools.
Then what is the CRT pre-2020? Define CRT pre-2020. That's what you're here to do. You've had 20 minutes to do it and several opportunities to lay it out. And all I'm hearing is nebulous terms and buzzwords. It's either history or it's not history. It's a theory, but it's also a practice. It's a legal framework, but it's not a legal framework. Let me tell you what it isn't, and not tell me what it isn't.
Right.
Yeah. It's secondary social studies.
Secondary social studies? That's what it is? Thank you, Chicago Mike, again. She lost me. At this point, she is sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher. It boggles my mind that you have three people from three different parts of the country, as far as I can tell, from three different disciplines, professions, life experiences, and so on, who all purport to be supporters of or experts in CRT, and not a single one of them can give us the 30-second sales pitch. And whatever sales pitch they're giving either doesn't make any sense or is completely contradictory to the next person's definition, if you want to call it a definition.
Which is my area. There are certain basic things that teachers are doing with students. They want students to be able to explore that there are multiple perspectives, multiple ways of seeing the past and the present. They want students to do critical thinking, which means to examine something, but look for what is the evidence that supports this position.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's very watered down. Yeah, but that's critical thinking. Yes, trying to take yourself out of it, remove yourself from the emotion and the partisan thinking, and actually look at what are the facts, What do you actually know versus what you assume? Yes. Okay.
They want students to do document-based analysis where they read the primary sources and secondary sources, and they analyze what is it that they're saying, what's their point of view, where are they coming from?
Yes. Compare and contrast. Yes. Based on either evidence or, what you can verify.
We want students to do close, careful reading. I think
Uh-huh.
the last is we want students to recognize that we learn best through dialogue, through respectful discussion where people express their point of views, they listen to others, but they root their ideas in evidence.
Yes. Okay. Everything he said so far, at least in sentiment, I'm completely on board with. Okay. What does that have to do with critical race theory?
That's what we're doing in secondary social studies.
Okay.
So they're introduced to a large number of topics. Was slavery the underlying cause of the American Civil War? Well, that's an important subject to discuss.
And it's been discussed since before CRT was ever created. And you can discuss that in the absence of CRT. What does that have to do with CRT?
And we want students to evaluate different perspectives.
Yeah, okay, so read the Civil War letters, go over the historians that have examined the ebbs and flows of politics at the time and the different states and what their arguments were for and against the Civil War. It's all there. The documentary evidence is there and has been there for a couple hundred years now. Okay, why do you need CRT? If you're just using critical thinking based on what you've already described, what is the utility of CRT? How does it add to that process? Why is it necessary?
I'm not interested in getting the students in a secondary school to agree with me because they're going to change their mind many times in the course of their life.
Well, if you mean that, and that is true, then you are definitely not the kind of teacher that is operating in the modern day today. Because I have looked at many, many teachers, and they're all very, very, very high on their own farts when it comes to their own perspectives on the world, and that their kids, they call them, in the classrooms, they want to make them change makers and activists, and they want them to be good social justice warriors. So if you actually mean what you say, good on you. What does this have to do with CRT?
But what I want them to do is to be able to examine something carefully and respectfully with others. That's what we do in secondary school.
Well, great. What does any of that have to do with CRT? I mean, good for you. If you mean that and that is what you were doing, great, fine. We're here to talk about the definition of CRT.
And I just want to point out, Max, there are a couple of maneuvers that are being used here.
Oh my, okay. Are you going to still complain about the complainers without giving us a definition?
To make it, this very nebulous question is CRT being taught in schools.
No, the very nebulous question seemingly is, what is CRT? Because you haven't described it.
Make it seem, to take it away from these great points that Francesca and Alan have made about what actually is being taught, much of which is, if not uncontroversial, then certainly not as controversial as what the pundits on this would say what it was.
So things are being taught that is CRT being taught in K through 12 or not? If the answer is no, then there's nothing more to discuss, is there?
To focus on two other things. One, the fact that every once in a while you'll find a news story where someone did something really weird in a classroom.
Yeah.
Like what?
And here's here's the thing about people doing really weird things in the classroom. There are tens of thousands of classrooms operating at any time in the United States. And if you have one teacher doing one weird thing, first of all, if you hear about it in the news, it's because their principal has already dealt with it, right? Like, this is not a problem anymore.
It's not a problem anymore, so it's not at all possibly indicative of patterns or curriculum being applied in other schools elsewhere. You just had one teacher do something weird, inspired by what? Guided by what? Given permission by what? It's impossible that they were following a playbook that is common elsewhere. It's not worth examining. You just had a decades-long educator talk about critical thinking, and some nut job does something and it's just a complete one-off and don't examine it at all?
This happened once. It was fixed. And second of all, like that means all the other 99.99% of the classrooms, everything's great.
Everything's great, or everything's not nearly as extremely presented as that one teacher? Okay. You are someone on a panel promoting something called critical race theory, which in its various definitions, forms, or otherwise is meant to examine things correctly. Correct? Look for patterns. Try to find the ways in which discrimination is applied here, there, and otherwise. Okay, if you have an outlier from the norm, is that indicative of it just being an outlier and a one-off? Or is that somebody who took what they've been told and other people are being told a step too far? What would you say be done in a situation where something like George Floyd happens? Okay, some cop did something weird. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's being done everywhere and that 99.9% of the rest of the police stations in the country are perfectly fine. Would that be your analysis? Would that be how you would approach that situation? Or was George Floyd used as an example of something and of an endemic problem? And were people wrong for thinking that way? I wonder what our speaker would say about that.
Right? Like this is not something that suggests some kind of huge systemic problem in classrooms.
So George Floyd does not suggest some huge systemic problem in law enforcement. I mean, if we're just going to be dismissive of, odd or outstanding, not in the sense of quality, but just in the sense of being visible, examples of things happening, then I guess George Floyd shouldn't have mattered as much as he did, should he have?
The other thing we see is the use of a couple of terms that have emerged from critical race theory, terms like intersectionality.
Wait. Intersectionality emerged from critical race theory. That's where intersectionality came from? All right, so it wasn't Christine Crenshaw. It wasn't Christine Crenshaw trying to make a legal argument about the nature of her client, who was both a woman and black at a company where she felt she was discriminated against, and trying to compound the idea of discrimination. Really? Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, did intersectionality come out of CRT? Is intersectionality not something that has been taught in schools? Wait, what?
Systemic racism.
Systemic racism. Okay, so and hey, maybe this is my history lesson. So intersectionality as a concept, or intersectional theory, systemic racism as a concept, those are outgrowths of CRT. Okay.
And saying that if you find that term in some discussion of some discussion of education or some teacher's manual, that means it's full of critical race theory. Well,
you just said that intersectionality and systemic racism are outgrowths of CRT. Why wouldn't you then say that this is CRT being used in school? Wait, hold on. I got to back up. I might go past my hour and a half here because this is too much.
And second of all, like that means all the other 99.99% of the classrooms, everything's great, right? Like this is not something that suggests some kind of huge systemic problem in classrooms. The other thing we see is the use of a couple of terms that have emerged from critical race theory, terms like intersectionality, systemic racism.
Oh, sorry, Kimberly Crenshaw. I said Christine Crenshaw. My apologies. Kimberly Crenshaw was, as far as I understand it, the person who coined the phrase intersectionality, the term intersectional theory, as a lawyer. I said Christine Crenshaw. Kimberly Crenshaw.
And saying that if you find that term in some discussion of some discussion of education or some teacher's manual, that means it's full of critical race theory. Well, look, just like any other body of theory, there are parts of critical race theory that have been more successful and more popularly adopted than others.
So intersectionality and systemic racism as a theory are CRT elements.
There are lots of people who think that Kimberly Crenshaw is wrong about a lot of things.
Well, at least I got that part right. But she was the one who promoted intersectionality the most vociferously. She's credited with having come up with the theory, right?
One of the leading voices in critical race theory.
Well, okay. So Kimberly Crenshaw was a student of critical race theory, and she came up with intersectionality. Is that it? Okay. I mean, if that's the timeline, then I've been corrected or reminded, because it's been a long time since I looked at Kimberly Crenshaw, but okay.
But most of them agree, who are scholars, that the idea of intersectionality, basically the idea that if you have, everyone has multiple identities, and those identities they sort of work together to influence how you interact with power structure. That's a broadly popular idea because it makes sense. And
it makes sense? Okay, so is that critical race theory then?
It doesn't. You can take it as separate from other parts of this theory, which are more hotly debated.
But it is a part of the theory, right?
Just because you find that word in some manual doesn't mean that critical race theory has taken over the public school system.
Well, shouldn't it at least suggest some suspicion? What are words used for? What are the purpose of terms? If intersectional theory is the offspring of CRT, and I see intersectional theory in a teacher's manual for a high school, why shouldn't I think that CRT is being promoted and used in a high school? You're not making any sense, dude.
Ridiculous.
No, it's not ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. What are words for? Okay, well, tell me why it's ridiculous. How has intersectionality drifted so far away from CRT that it no longer has any connection to it whatsoever? What does intersectional theory teach that critical race theory doesn't?
It's like saying that because you find the word democracy somewhere, that like John Locke's democratic theory is taken over. Like everyone is teaching, all of John Locke's writings to first graders. No, that's not how schools work.
So then it's worth looking into what is being taught and how it relates to your theory of origination, right? I mean, maybe it is. How do you know? Unless you look at what's being taught. So, what is being taught in an intersectional school? And how does that relate, if at all, to CRT? Of course, you'd have to then define CRT, which apparently is impossible. But why shouldn't I suspect that? My brain.
So when I was growing up, I'm 26 years old, but when I was growing up,
hey, for a 26-year-old, you're operating on a far more even-keeled playing field than your guests so far.
When I was growing up, everyone talked about equality. That was the big goal, was equality. Yes. And now I hear the word equity.
Yes.
What causes that change, and what does that change mean?
Okay, well, before they answer, and again, I think I might go a little bit over my time limit here, just because I might have to take a quick break, though. In fact, I think now's a good time to take a quick break. So quick intermission while I use the facilities, and I will be right back in just a couple of moments. And we're back. All right. So the question, what is the difference? Whoop, hold on. It's Sister Scribe. Hello, Sister Scribe. I'm okay. How are you? I am currently on the air. Would you like to say hello to all the folks? No, hold on. I got to put you up to, I got to put you up to the microphone. No, I got to put you up to the microphone. I have to put you up to the microphone. Hold on a second. All right, go ahead.
Hello, it's me, Sister Scribe.
There we go. It's Sister Scribe. Might I call you back in a little while? Okay. Thank you. I love you. Bye-bye. All right. Well, there it is. Live television. All right. So that was Sister Scribe making a cameo. Yeah, she says hello. All right. All right. So where were we? Yes, equality and equity. What is the difference between the two? All right. Before our speakers answer, here is my baseline understanding of the two. Equality, as a catch-all, means equality of opportunity. Everyone is given an equal opportunity to succeed. There is no guarantee of outcome. Equity is equality of outcome, wherein everything is arranged or structured or sometimes biased in order to see that everyone achieves the same end, the same success, even if they don't necessarily qualify on the basis of merit. So there's my understanding. What do our speakers have to say?
That's a very important question.
Yes.
Because equality means treating everybody the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Equity goes deeper and acknowledges that we all do not start off on the same playing field, that there are things that need to be remedied. One example, I was a bilingual teacher. Just because I'm giving students access to the curriculum in English, which everybody gets, does not guarantee that students who do not speak English as their primary language have access to that curriculum. It was a decision in 1974 in the Lau v. Nichols case, right? Equity means you modify things to ensure that everybody does get access to.
That's equality of opportunity. That's not equity. If I go into a classroom and the language being taught in the classroom is Spanish and I don't speak Spanish, giving me materials that are in English provides me an equal opportunity to learn. It does not guarantee my outcome. I can still fail in English even if the class is being taught in Spanish. No.
To that thing that should be the same.
No.
So again, as a bilingual teacher, that meant using theory and research that we know about second language learning to make sure that my students were gaining content.
That's equality of access. That is not equity of outcome. No.
As they also develop their English skills, right? I'm not teaching the class in the same way had I a set of students who only spoke English, right?
You weren't teaching the class. Wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you're teaching the class in two different languages at once, of course you're not teaching the class in the same way, one language to another, because it's two different languages. But all you're doing is enabling the students to have equality of access to the course materials, and thus having equal opportunity to rise or fall on their own merits, with the advantage of being able to understand what's being said. Equality of access is not equity as it's currently being rendered. I'm sorry to say.
Right. So there is a distinction, but it leads to outcomes that hopefully lead to equality. Right?
No, none of what you said made any sense. You just described equality of opportunity. Someone coming into a class, not understanding the language. Teaching the class in that language levels the playing field of their ability to access the information to achieve whatever outcome they're going to achieve academically. That's equality of opportunity. It's a very good example of providing equal opportunity through bilingual studies and bilingual access. That, as an example unto itself, that's great. That is not distinguishing between equality and equity as those terms are currently being used.
Right.
No.
In New York State, a lot of school funding is local based on property tax. As a result, in affluent communities, there's a lot more money available to schools for kids from affluent families. So one of the arguments is that, well, all schools should get the same amount of funds. That would be equality. But there are schools that have kids with much greater needs, special learning issues, language issues. Equity would mean concentrating your resources, providing more money to schools where the kids had the greatest need.
That's increasing opportunity. That's not. Okay. You want to give it a shot there, Jeremy?
I agree with these are great comments, and I would just
no, they're not. They're really not. You guys are not distinguishing between the two terms. Define equality of opportunity as opposed to equity of outcome. It's very simple. It's actually very, very simple.
Say, the misnomer about equity is that it means that all outcomes are the same.
Okay, so you mean to tell me that when someone's talking about equity, they're not talking about arranging things in such a way that everybody succeeds, no matter what. There's not an assumption of deficiency in some people versus others, or an assumption of advantage in some people versus others that equity seeks to artificially level by the time you get to the end of the process. Are you sure about that?
Right. People talk about equity as though it is the same thing as communism.
Well, there are some similarities.
Right. Everyone gets the same outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah. So there is there or is there not a okay, if there is no contrast between equality and equity, why the two terms? Why the two terms? If that's 100% wrong, then there should be no need to distinguish between equality and equity, right?
That's not what it means.
Okay.
It's about leveling the playing field.
It's about leveling the playing field. Okay, so it's equality of opportunity then? Then why don't you just say equality of opportunity? Why are you saying, why is equity even being used at all to distinguish? What do you mean?
It's not about having all of the results be exactly the same.
Okay, you're making absolutely no sense. Define equality, define equity. This entire presentation so far has been a comedy of errors on the very notion of definition. You have three scholars here, or purported scholars or experts. And when it comes down to it, we could have saved ourselves 20 minutes of this originating talk if we just define our terms when the moderator asked for definitions. And yet here we are.
It's just, as Francesca put it very well, it's a more sophisticated way of talking about equality of opportunity than the equality frame is.
It's a more sophisticated way of talking about equality of opportunity. So equity is just equality of opportunity? More sophisticated. Oh, well, pardon me. I didn't know I had to have my nose scraping the ceiling to talk about equity. What are you... More sophisticated. All right, well then, sophisticate it for me. Tell me what it means. How is it more sophisticated? What?
But it's not any of how it's been presented.
But it's not what it has been, but you... Okay. I've said it before in various ways. I honestly approach these things with an open mind every time I pull them up. I'm honestly hoping to learn something, to either have my mind changed or to be proven wrong about something, or at the very least to understand what is being said from one side of an argument to another, whether I agree with it or not by the end of the day. At least I can approach it in an honest fashion, right? It's one thing to just, lock yourself inside of a bubble and never listen to any other outside perspectives and just believe that everything that you think is right and never have any of your beliefs challenged. It's a very safe, very simple way to live. Okay. I cannot describe to you the mental, spiritual frustration I feel when I am making, as best as I can, though in an entertaining way perhaps, an honest attempt to understand what is being said by the quote-unquote side of the argument that maybe I inherently or instinctively have issues with. Because I want to know, what is the answer? How do I have it wrong? Am I operating on assumptions? Am I operating on an echo chamber of my own? I don't know. That's why I'm willing to listen to people who say that they are for or are educated on or experts in subjects where I'm kind of iffy. And yet here we are, 3 more. And go back to the last time I looked at CRT, and you'll have 2 more. And none of these people know each other, as far as I know, or work together, or from the same backgrounds, or have the same education or experiences. And they're asked the same question. Explain what CRT is. If I'm wrong, if I've been just so involved with myself in the course of this broadcast that they've given us a straight answer and I just whiffed over it, by all means, quote them in the comments. Give me a timestamp. Here's where the definition was, and I just whiffed it. I just completely T-balled it, and I'm stupid. But I've been listening very intently. Have we heard anything definitive about anything here? I'm going to give another couple of minutes at least. I know I threatened to do part 2s in the past, and oftentimes I don't. Maybe I will with this. I don't know. Let's see.
So, Alan, you're in New York. Jeremy, where are you?
In Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. And Francesca?
Pennsylvania, State College.
Pennsylvania. Okay. And I'm in Maine. So none of us are in Florida, which is we got to talk about Florida.
Do we really want to talk about Florida? Okay. I'm going to see what he asks about Florida. And if it sounds like something that I care about, okay, I'll let it go. If not, I might stop here.
Why have I heard so much about Florida in connection with critical race theory?
Oh, it's just going to be DeSantis, isn't it? Now we're not even talking about the definition of critical race theory. We're just talking about the politics surrounding it, which doesn't tell me anything about what it is. Talking about the rhetoric around it is part of the problem, right? I would think they would agree with that. The rhetoric around CRT is presumably diluting or confusing the actual truth of CRT. And yet after 26 minutes of this presentation and an hour and a half plus of thinking about it and considering what they're saying, I don't feel like I'm learning anything about what CRT is or what it isn't. So I think I'm going to stop here. If there's really, really a desire by you guys for me to continue with this, I might do it in a secondary broadcast. Maybe I'll continue it off on the Discord at some point, and we can watch that together. Speaking of the Discord, before I move on, real quick, if you'd like to join the Discord server, I'm putting a link to that in the chat now. The way you can join the Discord server is to go there, click on the link, land on the landing channel, which is say hello. And along with saying hello, you have to say the secret word, because the secret word will tell me and my moderators that you watch the show and thus have earned the right to become part of the Discord server. And today's secret word is equity. Sure, equity. Why not? Let's see what you guys have to say on it real quick before I start rolling things down. Roger Reynolds, how much money was that one Baltimore school given over years, and did it help? No kids are dumber than they went in. You mean no comma, kids are dumber than when they went in? I don't know. I don't know about any Baltimore school. I need some specificity on that one. Speaking of specificity, Scanner Daffley, your boy just said that money should be taken from some schools and given to other more needy schools. My dude, you are a communist. Ask a simple question, right? What's the difference between equality and equity in the current zeitgeist? And immediately, equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. That's it. That is fundamentally it. But they did everything they possibly could to avoid that very present truth. And Francesca, down in the corner, she brought up an example that just highlighted equality of opportunity, not equity. Anyway, I could go on. Let's see. Anybody else? Anything you want to say? TC, spiritual, whiskey, rum, brandy. Oh, as far as my spiritual self being harmed, oh man, yes, my internalized whiskey is being bruised. There's nothing worse than bruised whiskey, I think. Let's see. Shadow Claw, they definitely did not want to get clipped. That's why they haven't been straightforward. I hadn't thought about that. They don't want to provide a one size fits all soundbite that they can have. I mean, that is conceivably a worry these days with cherry picking and people being taken out of context and so on. But at some point or another, you have to just say it as it is. If you're going to talk in nebulous and couch terms all the time, you don't come across as an expert in any way, shape, or form, in my mind. And purportedly, again, we had 3 people who had looked at this very, very specifically for years or decades, and I didn't get a sense that there was any standard understanding of the concept, which is bizarre. And I guess the part that really threw me for a loop, and of course I said it at the time, is to say that, intersectionality and systemic racism as accusations or theories are direct outgrowths of CRT. But if you see them in course materials or something, that doesn't mean that CRT is being taught in that classroom. What? That's ridiculous. Are you what? So anyway, yeah, the C in CRT means critical. Just don't think critically about critical race theory, because if you think too critically about critical race theory and apply critical thinking, you might end up being a racist or something, I guess. Anyway, everyone, I'm going to call it here. I want to thank you all for joining me on this odyssey, this crusade, pogrom, whatever, against the nonsense of CRT versus the truth of CRT, whatever that is. And I'll still occasionally give somebody a chance to explain it to me in a way that would make sense to a 5th grader. Oh, wait, we don't teach 5th graders CRT, just intersectionality. That's fine. Either way, everyone, hope you have a good rest of your Sunday. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, thank you guys so much for your generosity. And I did forget to point out at the top of the chat box, the fundraisers for our friends Moonshock, Angry Illinoisian, and Alyssa. If you guys would take a look at those, if you have a chance, and donate if you can. And if you cannot, by all means, please share those links out on social media. I feel like an absentee father, having not mentioned that earlier. Apologies. And thank you, Keeverdam, as always, for providing those links. Everyone, have a good rest of your Sunday. Have a good rest of your weekend. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.